Many of the members had been married and divorced. Very few had children. Some had traveled many places throughout the world. Most of them didn't have as good of habits as some of us did. They were drinking and having their cocktails there at this particular occasion, and many smoked. But there were four of us and our wives: Ward Barker and his wife, Mr. and Mrs. Melvin Atkinson, Mr. and Mrs. Ezra Cragun, and Mildred and me, four couples. It was very evident in hearing our reports that our lives had been different than theirs. All of us had remained close to the church. We had good habits, and believe it or not, the four of us couples, we had more children than all of the others put together. And I'm sure that we had shown to them, by the way we appeared and the report that we had given, that we had certainly enjoyed happy lives, and this made quite an impression on them. In 1927, a new Weber High School was constructed at 1100 North Washington Boulevard in Ogden. I drove my father's bus, transporting students from Pleasant View to Weber High School. It was a small Chevrolet with an improvised, enclosed, bus-like body accommodating about 20 to 25 students. During the winter, it was a real chore to get that bus to school on time. Frozen radiators, bad roads, and all those things that can happen. We always seemed to have an abundance of snow and cold in those days. The highways were narrow, never salted or plowed. There was no requirement for a driver to be a certain age or be licensed. So I took my fellow classmates to school. I was chided for driving on to Ogden High after unloading the students, and I attended Ogden High early in the morning for band. The attempt was made to keep the Ogden High Band of 1926 together. However, in a few weeks this failed, so that I spent from there on my full time at the new Weber High. Now, Weber High at this time was only partially finished. The hallways were dirt. Later, boards were placed along. We dodged the plasters and the painters. Only the footings were set in the enclosed gym. No outside steps. Not all the windows were in. Temporary lights, and so forth. The first student body meeting was outside on the south. We practiced football in the meadow, in a meadow pasture down 12th Street. And you can imagine what happened down there in a meadow where cows were, in order to get some practicing done. I played halfback and fullback positions. We lost most of our games, but learned much, and certainly made lasting friendships. So we were the real pioneers of 1927 at Weber High School. Several reunions have been held during the past 50 years. I have been the chairman, with Marion Widdowson Cox Arvey, vice chairman, for all of the reunions. The most exciting reunion of all was the 50th, held April the 15th, 1977, in the original Weber High. A yearbook covering the 50 years since we left Weber High was assembled and printed with a summary report from all living students that attended the 1927 student body. At this reunion, a visiting hour was most pleasant and refreshing, and a real thrill. A fine banquet was enjoyed. An interesting program was next, and then a large group photograph. All these made the occasion a memorable one. 400, including partners, attended. Details with pictures and clippings are found in my school reunion scrapbook. Soon after the close of my senior year at Weber High in 1927, in the spring, I became very ill. I'd previously enjoyed, during the school year and previous to this, very good health. I weighed 165 pounds, played football, had been a band member, drove the school bus. This had been a good year for me. But now I was sick. I had infections somewhere. I finally became bedridden, and my mother cared for me. And over the period of weeks, I didn't seem to get better, and the doctor, my uncle, Dr. Wiley Cragun, Dad's brother, said that he couldn't find the source of the infection. Many of my neighbors and friends, including Harvey Taylor, came and gave me some comfort. Harvey said that he himself, when he was a boy, was ill and finally got over it and enjoys good health now, and encouraged me to have faith and determination, and surely I would get well. I had rheumatism, and then I had neuritis, and finally I was so ill that I couldn't feed myself. I couldn't walk. I remember on more than one occasion the family was called in to take a look at me, and I am sure that they were uncertain as to whether I should even live. My mother insisted that we call in other doctors. Dr. Morrell, Dr. McKay, and others were called in. They indicated that they couldn't find the source of infection. My uncle, Dave Osler, who is Aunt Violet's, Dad's sister's husband, came up from his practice in Eureka, Utah, one Sunday, and Mother asked him to give us his opinion as to maybe what was my trouble. In so doing, he finally said, "I think this boy's tonsils are bad. If you would ask me what to do, I should suggest that they should be removed." The other doctors had looked at my tonsils and said that there was no infection there that they could see. Well, they finally took me to the hospital as a last resort. And it's a terrible feeling to be in the hospital and not know what is wrong with you. And when they say nobody knows, that even makes it worse. It was decided to have Dr. Pugmire look at me and determine what he thought about the need for removing my tonsils. That was in his particular area of surgery. And we decided to have them removed. And after this was done, I had an immediate setback and a reaction. And the doctors decided that this was a sign that they should have been removed. And of course, Dr. Pugmire said that they were surely infected from on the inside. Tonsils. Infected tonsils caused havoc with me. And I think all my life I've never quite been free from the effects of that horrible sickness. I was sick from spring time into the fall. I should mention that while I was so ill, that I made a plea with the Lord and a promise to Him that if I could get better, that I would do all I could to help further His purposes and live a good life. After some recuperation, I returned home from the hospital, and with loving care from my mother and my dad, it wasn't long until I was improving. And I had to learn to walk again. And this seems sort of an unusual statement for a young, healthy fellow. The best years of his life, 18 years of age, to have to learn to walk. But how well I remember from getting on my feet, learning to stand, and then taking a step from one chair to another. This was a real chore, and certainly a new and a non-forgettable experience of mine. My uncle, Dr. Wiley M. Cragun, Dad's brother, operated near his home a small dairy herd in Ogden on 34th Street and Adams Avenue. We delivered hay to his cows. This hay was transported on hay racks pulled by a team of horses through North Ogden and down the full length of Washington Boulevard to 34th Street. The Pleasant View and North Ogden roads were surfaced with gravel. At certain times there were ruts in many places. On the North Ogden Road, particularly in the area of Chadwick's Meadows, which is about halfway between the center of North Ogden town and Ogden city limits on the north, we often had troubles. The abundance of surface water here affected the road, causing it to often be soft and soggy. We always took 2 teams and 2 loads of hay, so that when and if the wagons would get mired down, we would double up the horses and pull 1 load through at a time. At the watering trough on Washington Boulevard in front of the old Pioneer Tabernacle near 22nd Street in Washington, the horses would be given a drink of water. And a real concern always was getting the horses to be able to back up the load of hay away from the watering trough so that we could continue on our journey without them falling down. There were no signs, street signs, no light semaphores, few automotive vehicles. There were numerous carriages and horses, and livery stables were handy so that they could care for horses where people wanted to shop or have them kept overnight. And so we did as each one of us on our individual loads of hay needed to do to go negotiate Washington Boulevard, the main street in Ogden. Imagine seeing a load of hay pulled by a team of horses driving through the center of Ogden today. We would deliver and unload the hay by hand pitchforks, and then return home, taking a full day to make the complete trip. In the coldest part of winter, usually between Thanksgiving and Christmas or New Year's time, we drove to Wilson Lane Sugar Factory for loads of beet pulp, which was good feed for cows. If wagons were taken, some places would surely be icy. If bobsleds were used, some bare roads would always seem to be found. I dreaded these day-long trips, first because we didn't have warm clothes of any kind, seldom had gloves, and sometimes would have to run alongside the wagons to keep from literally freezing. Loading the beet pulp by scoop shovel would give us a real workout, and it was hard work. It took time. The next problem would be to dry out from the sweating of loading this beet pulp before getting horribly cold again on the way home, and hope that the horses could pull the load over dry or slippery spots. At times, the last part of the way home would be after dark, and we would be almost frozen. We usually on the way home would work our way down into the smelly beet pulp to help us keep warm. These trips were always miserable. The only fun part was to see my little dog run alongside, meet strange dogs and get them into a fight with each other, and he'd always seem to crawl out of the fracas, free from direct involvement, and continue on its merry way to start up another fight later on down the road. I'd like to review some of my associations with Reuben Thomas Reese, Mildred's father. I began working for R.T. Reese when I was just a boy of 13. I served first as an errand boy, helped in putting in foundation and waxing frames for the bees. Mildred did this kind of work also, and we had an opportunity to visit and get better acquainted, although we had known each other all our lives. Her father was referred to by the workers and many others as merely R.T. Everyone liked and respected R.T. This was really an affectionate title. He was considered very authoritative because of being exceptionally well-read and extremely knowledgeable in nearly all subjects. He was a good organizer and always planned ahead and had his priorities well listed. The law of diminishing returns was really a part of his philosophy. Order and discipline surely had their place in his schedule. A conspicuous sign overhead in his shop said, in his own printing, "If you can't put it back, don't take it." I don't believe anyone, including his own sons, were more impressed by that sign than I have been, and especially was at the time. The meaning of this sign and the way R.T. operated his activities in connection with it has literally guided me in the way I operate my life. I surely know that I am considered an extremist in the matter of being fussy and being exacting and even severe in the care of cars, tools, equipment. In very fact, I guess I'm exacting in all things. His bee apiaries, or yard locations, were located from Fielding in Box Elder County on the north to Farmington in the south part of Davis County. in out of way places, rarely seen from the highway. Down in hollows, behind a sand hill, in a deserted orchard, or around the bend. Consequently, he drew maps, usually on the ground, sketching distances, what to look for, where to turn, bad spots to negotiate in the lanes or meadows, when to be sure to lock gates, and so forth and so forth. He pointed out a dead tree, a red barn, second road to the left, through an open ditch, close to the north side of an abandoned threshing machine, and so forth. If you were a good listener, you wouldn't get lost. I have adapted this method as very effective in my communications with others. When traveling with R.T., he would enlighten those with him of the things he had learned through his wide experience of reading. He was a great reader, self-educated. A part of his daily schedule was to allow himself an hour to read and learn. He disciplined himself to place priorities in their proper perspective: family, church, education, counseling members of his family and friends, learning from others, service in society, care of things you control. He practiced and exemplified in his life the virtues of being happy with your lot in life, helping people, seek to do better, self-improvement, spend wisely, set up the habit of saving, schedule an amount you want to save. Discipline yourself to get along, make do without. He believed there is a time and a place for things, that those who get in trouble get these mixed up. He didn't waste time, because that is the stuff life is made of. Do your best, then you'll always be happy with your efforts. I know many facets in my life have been enhanced by knowing this great man. Because of him, I have sought higher goals, tried to do better, exercised self-disciplines, worked harder, have been more practical, and loved more than I would have ever been without my association with him. Because I had driven my father's truck as a small boy in gathering and delivering cream that was to be taken to Ogden, R.T. assigned me to haul honey to Hewlett Brothers in Salt Lake City. I was really too small to effectively do bee work in the yards, but was considered able and capable to operate the truck because of my unusual earlier experiences in driving. No age limit nor license was required till years later. My biggest problem was to lift the 5-gallon cans weighing 60 pounds into the truck, but I managed to do it. A load in the Commerce truck was about 40 cans. As a boy, the trip to Salt Lake City seemed a long one. One trip, sometimes two, were made in a day. Hewlett Brothers produced jams, jellies, and syrups. They roasted peanuts, prepared certain spices, and packaged honey, and did other things. R.T. owned stock in Hewlett's, and they handled his honey harvest each year. There was no town in Roy, one store in Sunset, a root beer stand, blacksmith shop, and a store in Clearfield, a few stores in Layton, and a comparatively few homes in any of these places. Most all of this whole area was occupied by good forms. The roads then were narrow, going through the center of each community, including Farmington and Bountiful. Gasoline was available in Ogden, at Danzy's store in the old Layton Road, and in Salt Lake City. The one who trucked the honey was somewhat of a loner, often having to sleep in a yard alone to watch the honey and get loaded for an early start to Salt Lake the next morning. In Honeyville, several cans of honey were stolen every year at night time during the extracting season. One year we filled a goodly number of cans full of water and put them in the handiest place. They disappeared all right, but the stealing wasn't repeated after that. We sort of felt that the man learned a lesson out of that particular incident. A real experience I had as the trucker of the honey was when I would bring back home a large load of empty cans. When a load of new empty cans were taken to Honeyville over the then washboardy dirt road, the noise was almost unbearable. I'd try driving slow, then drive fast, and try to hit the tops of the washboards, but the noise was terrible regardless. The newer extracting equipment was tightly enclosed on the chassis of a Model T truck that had for its rear wheels hard rubber tires. This whole outfit was designed, fabricated and assembled by RT. It was common to get stuck in ditches, in loose sand and pasture land because of these hard tires that would readily sink out of sight. At one time, as the equipment was being driven in from West Layton, a man on a load of hay was ahead and wouldn't move over so we could pass. He also kept his horses on just merely a walk. Miles later, when we did get around him, Ellis Wade, who worked on the extractor, jumped off, held the man's horses, and challenged him to come down off of his load of hay. The man didn't dare do it, but Ellis gave him an everlasting blessing that was surely well punctuated. When I was older, my assignments included working in the extractor as a capping and also as an extractor man, and in the yard wheeling honey as well, and also doing some trucking. Working right in the bees